Generally, when I start my sermon, I don't start off with some lofty reflection. I try to start out with something that's pretty simple because I know you're just getting adjusted in your pews and you're watching the folks from up here come down and the kids. You're not ready for something really deep and profound, but today I'm getting pretty serious, so I want to start with something really profound right off the bat. I'm going to ask a simple question to you that will sound not too simple and probably isn't. And here's the question. How do we, as human beings, discern reality? How do we figure out what is really real? Well, you might say in Philosophy 101 with Bill, well, you look around. You look around, you use your senses, you utilize your eyes and your ears. You might even decide to measure some things. You might test kids or adults. You will look at and consider the facts on the ground. And then you will be able to conclude what is really real. Now, one of the criticisms of us religious people is that we tend not to look at the facts on the ground, that somehow our minds are disconnected from reality. Our minds and our hearts are said to be somewhere in the ether land, floating in some unreal never land. You might come to that conclusion as you read or hear the prophet Isaiah's description of his calling. It's such an amazing story. It's really quite bizarre. Isaiah says that his calling happened in the year that King Uzziah died, which would mean at that time a time of national crisis. You see, Uzziah had been a stable king, and now things were looking pretty messy. And it's in the midst of the messiness that Isaiah has this wild vision of God sitting on a throne over everything, high and lofty, we are told. And in the vision, Isaiah gets to see not all of God. This is so typical for the Bible. Isaiah gets to see the lower half of God, the robe that God is wearing, and Isaiah is overwhelmed by the size of that robe. We are told that the hem of the garment fills the entire temple. This is no small garment. This is huge. The temple is no small place, much, much larger than this place. And around God are these seraphim. I love seraphim. They are fiery, flying snake angels. Oh, that's really real, isn't it? That's really real. These flying snake angels have 6 wings. With two of them, they cover their faces because, you really can't look at God. God is too bright. And with 2, they cover their feet. You've been around me long enough, you know that when the Bible writers are very polite, they don't mean your feet. That's a way of saying your private parts. They cover their private parts because when you are in the presence of God, you want to be a bit modest. So you're going to cover yourself up. And with 2 of them, they flew. And as they fly, they are singing back and forth to each other. Holy, holy, holy is God. The whole earth is full of God's glory. Interestingly enough, even the angels of heaven aren't preoccupied with heaven. They are preoccupied with the earth. They see God's glory writ large on each continent, each lake, each sea, each tree, and I'll bet even each person. And as the fiery flying snakes sing, the temple shakes and is filled with smoke. When I said that on Thursday night, this wind blew up and shook the temple here. The temple shakes, it's filled with smoke, and Isaiah is gobsmacked Wow, he cries out, woe is me. I am in way over my head. I'm lost. Let's face it. I'm small when compared to God. And moreover, let's be honest, I'm a man of unclean lips. You want me to talk with my lips. That's what you're doing. You're calling me to use my lips. But my lips have been used for a lot of junk. And what's more, the people who surround me have some pretty dirty lips themselves. We're all really, really sinful. And then one of these fiery, flying snakes takes a burning coal. Again, isn't this sounding really real? And touches my lips with it. I have felt for a long time we need some new rituals around here. So I think this would be a great one. Bring a nice little something to, what do you call it? Grill. Bring a nice grill in and some charcoal, and we could do this. Everybody come forward and get their lips burned by a coal. So when this happened, this fiery flying snake angel talks and says, with this burning coal, your lips are purified. Your lips are purified. In other words, your excuses are over. Your guilt has departed you, and your sin has been blotted out. And I, Isaiah, said, holy Toledo, holy mackerel, holy guacamole, Batman, holy socks. I am out of my league, but I can't help myself. I can't help myself. I'm hearing a call, and I'm volunteering for the job. Push, send me. Do you see what I mean about religion? I mean, it's weird. It can feel really out of touch with reality so much of the time. Isaiah seems to be lost in the ether land someplace. He seems to be out of touch with what we know as reality. I mean, most of us. I mean, Shar might, but most of us don't deal with fiery flying snakes. Most of us don't experience the pivots of the church building shaking. So obviously this isn't really real. Well, wait a minute, the Bible says. You have a very limited imagination of what is really real. The really real can't always be measured. The really real can't always be captured by our rational minds. We think that the really real is simply what we create, what life as we live it looks like. So when people say, there's an alternative to war, we say, oh, but that is not realistic. And when someone says money doesn't have to run everything, we often respond, well, in the real world, it does. But you see, the role of religion is to announce that there is another real world. And sometimes what religion does is to use crazy language and crazy images to help us know that other real world. And that is what is going on in Isaiah today. The prophet Isaiah has experienced another real world, and that real world is one that takes with utmost seriousness something big and grand and even a little scary. This something big sometimes makes you feel small. This something big puts your life in some kind of perspective. This something big makes your self-preoccupation seem a little silly. This something big you cannot look at directly, but you know is real nonetheless as you experience the overwhelming largeness of Lake Michigan and the insights of science about the age of the universe and the size of the cosmos. This something big fascinates you, and at the same time, makes you a little nervous, makes you tremble a bit. And this something big makes you recognize that you are messed up, that you are men and women of unclean lips, just like everybody else. But the experience of the something big doesn't stop with the reality of your deficits. Something bigger than your deficits keeps calling your name, keeps moving you beyond all your excuses. Oh, you know those excuses. I'm too messed up, I'm too small, I'm too shy, I come from a dysfunctional family, I've done some really stupid things. Yeah, it's true. But the voice of the really big speaks, a voice you've heard before, a voice that will not put up with your excuses. And you know that this voice is really real. Oh, I understand. Sometimes that voice is mixed with your opinions, or your thoughts that your family or your culture or your political party put into your brain. There's no doubt that you have to do some work to discern what voice you are hearing. But nonetheless, you know the voice. You've heard it. You grasp that it is speaking not just to human beings in general, but to you in particular. And it is worth your while to respond to the voice, to volunteer, to raise your hand and say, "Send me." Now, yes, responding to this big voice will take you to a very different real world. And I must clue you in on something. People won't always receive you well when you listen to the big voice. Actually, when you look at what follows our text from Isaiah today, you experience a warning from God to Isaiah that the folks he's called to speak to won't listen to him. But he's told to go nonetheless. The voice of the really big is calling him. In spite of the reality that folks won't receive him, it's a different world that he knows and that he is to trust. When you respond to the voice of the really big, life will look more like mercy and love and compassion than measuring and counting. The really big, the really real in the life of Jesus tells us this, is the bigness and the reality of love. It's love that's unsettling you. It is love that is calling you. It's love that will make you uncomfortable with how the world defines the really real. The world is preoccupied, with money and power and popularity and poll numbers and test scores and fitting in and succeeding. The world sometimes only sees the so-called facts on the ground. The world's definition of what is really real really is quite small. But the really real is much bigger than our smallness, much bigger than our puny definitions of what is truly true, much bigger than even the so-called facts on the ground. You and I are living in tough times, and whether the facts on the ground are personal, national, or global, sometimes they seem grim. The voices that are calling us, that are shouting at us 24 hours a day, don't seem to be taking us to something grand or noble. In fact, they seem to be dousing us with fear and anxiety. Is there something more real than the fear and the anxiety? Is there something more real than the anger or the despair? Is there a voice calling us to something grand, something good, something right? Well, Isaiah is convinced that there is. It's the voice of God. The voice of God is really real. This voice, God, is calling us to love and hope. This voice is the voice of the really big that spoke to Jesus and told him to get out of the grave. This voice was heard by Peter and the 12, 500 brothers and sisters, and even by the really messed up man, Paul. This voice keeps calling us. So don't give up. Hear the voice. Respond. And be sent by love and hope for the sake of love and hope. Amen.